by having a feature where you don't have something like this, where you don't have something that your audience can leave with, it's not fair to them. That you're removing part of what the experience of your reading could be. Chapbooks are super valuable for poets. In publishing, they're kind of a cheat code, because in the traditional publishing works like this: like you submit a poem, the poem gets published. In general, no other journal wants to publish that. No one wants to touch that poem again, because it's like it's tainted. It's already published. It's like we want pure.
Get this poem away from me.
Chapbooks can break that, because chapbooks can take those published poems, and I'm thinking now less of the homemade chapbooks and more of the published, like competitions and things like that. So chapbooks will allow you to take typically poems you've already published. Okay, you can include a little acknowledgments page to indicate where the poems originally appeared, some in earlier versions, and then you can publish that chapbook full of poems you've already published. And in some ways that really helps with also developing those connections, because now you have a connection not only with your chapbook publisher, but then you also have a connection with all the different editors of the journals where your poems were published. And this is developing your professional network in the poetry world. And when that chapbook comes out, you can reach out to those editors where those poems originally appeared and be like, hey guys, thank you so much again for publishing my work. I'm excited to tell you that it's now appearing in this chapbook. The other reason that this can build further is that so that the chapbook appears, and in general, you don't take poems from a chapbook and then put them in another chapbook. Usually that doesn't occur. Okay. Because again, those poems are no longer pure again. The same issue. But once you get ready to do a full length, well, now you can then take the poems that have been published in journals and then were published in a chapbook, and then you can take those poems again and get them published in the full length collection. So you're able to kind of triple dip.
Having that poetry, having that chapbook from an artist it's really impactful, because it's almost like a business card, but like it's a way of like kind of leaving your mark like in the city. Like actually I got like 4 gigs cut this was again years ago, but I got like 4 gigs off of like one of the chapbooks. I had like a vending machine chapbook, and like literally like somebody like reached out to me. They were just like, yeah, like I read this piece, and I want to be clear. So I wrote a chapbook, and it's legitimately about a vending machine. There's actually no real deeper meaning. It's legitimately like I really wanted to like Seinfeld this thing up. Like there's like no deeper meaning. It's just but like people would reach out to me. They're just like, wow. They're like, I understand what you're getting at here. I'm like, do you? Because I fill me in. Yeah, it's just to say that you never know what is going to strike with who, and having chapbooks, having a product that you can actually give to somebody that's a product of your work. So like a lot of poets, they have other things, that have other merch, that have pins and stuff like that. And that's all that stuff is cool. Like there's nothing wrong with, those things. But I think chapbooks are really special, because chapbooks are, kind of taking a piece of that poet with you, but then also being able to reference it if later on down the line, if you, could use a poet for things. It's like I have a chapbook from somebody who I really like.
It's tricky. I mean, chapbooks don't necessarily get the same level of prestige as like a full length, but it's still better than nothing. Like there's no reason, like if you have a feature, you could make a chapbook of all the poems that you plan on reading that you could then sell afterwards, having just something where people can remember the event by, I think is something that's really beneficial. It's not something I tap into enough when I do readings, but why not? You can get your reading fee, but then you could also add on a couple of sales, and then on top of that, like it's just another opportunity for people to connect with your work. Because a lot of times with readings, I don't know about you, but like I always do better like having the page and being able to read the page. Like I like listening to poem, but I always get more when I'm actually able to kind of read and see what's going on with the text. So sometimes that's nice to have that guide.
I had this feature in Dayton, and I actually set up my feature set. So I actually did exactly that. Like the poems that I was doing are like all the poems that were in the chapbook, and I actually set it up like a play. And I was like,
that's cool.
Like, and in that way it could be like, in order to get this playbill, like you have like that's going to cost you, right? And so then it just kind of set up like where there was like a really natural connection between what I was doing on stage and the product that I was selling. Because then it's like, okay, is it I mean, selling the chapbook is like, it's good, but it's like, you know, if I'm just selling the chapbook of all the things that I'm doing right now and only things I'm doing right now, then there has to be some reason that, you know, some connectivity to them, or some like connective tissue that's like, oh, this is this, and so this is part of the experience, and not just part of the experience in that I've listened to it, but it's also part of the experience. Like, when I leave a play, I have listened to the play, but I also have the playbill.
I like that idea again, because again, it ties into the experience. So suddenly having that chapbook and be able to give that chapbook to someone that's linked to a reading. Again, there's it's the poems, but it's also language teacher mode kind of entering. So like with like vocabulary, if you're trying to learn a new word, like you ever tried to like learn a word like in another language and like you just keep forgetting it like over and over
again? I keep forgetting words in this language.
Well, it can work for this too. So, that's usually a sign of that you just don't have enough connections with the word. There's just not enough associations. Like the more associations you have with something, the more evocative it is. Like if you can like smell a word, if you can taste a word, if you can visualize a word, if you can get an idea what it feels like if you touch it, or the emotion it brings you, it's much harder to forget that word. Yeah. And I think that we're almost attaching all of those sorts of emotions and experiences onto the chapbook itself. Like suddenly the chapbook isn't just the chapbook. The chapbook is that experience that I attended, like made manifest into this thing I'm holding through my hands.
I actually got a story. So like there's this artist, he's a poet. He actually just recently passed. His name is Oz. And man, okay, so here's the thing. I've only ever seen this poet perform the like in real life one time in my entire life, right? It changed my entire perspective on poetry. You know, and this was fairly early on in my, you know, in going out to poetry shows. I think at this point I had not even had like a feature, you know what I mean? Like, so at this point I was really, really new to the poetry scene in Columbus. And this was the first feature that I saw there. It's really hard to describe that those performances, because it was a feature set, right? And I remember when I saw him perform that poem, I had decided in my budget that whatever he has to sell, I need it. Like, I absolutely need it. That at that time, what that set did and what that poem did to me as a writer and a performer and just a person, like it really transcends anything that I can really kind of optimally describe to you. But I was able to walk away from that space with this chapbook, and it's just like this idea that like the shape that performance took, now that I have this chapbook, what, like, you know, the next day it's like that performance became even more special when I can actually watch, like, and listen to it in my head, and I can have this book in my hands. And so like that's the kind of and I mean, I don't know, it's going to be hard to ever attain that kind of resonance, because it's going to be hard for any mortal person to like really perform to that degree or to that level. But just that feeling of, hey, I walked away from this poetry performance that I really enjoyed, and I really liked this artist, and now I have this book that, you know,
it transports you back
3 weeks from now, a month from now, again, it's like been like a decade since I got this book, and like legitimately every time I read that poem, it's like I'm right there.
I think that really speaks to the value of having something like that attached to your features as well, because if you just found the book by itself and you didn't have that not to say that it wouldn't have moved you, but it sounds like it would have lost, the impact might not have been the same.
You wouldn't have that additional component of, because again, just what you're talking about when it comes to like you're bringing all those senses together, right? So you know, not only do I, because like the strongest sense that you can have is like memory, right? So now it's like I have this physical copy of this physical book, but the thing that happens when I'm reading the book is all memory. I'm able to really hear his voice performing this poem. And again, I can read the poems, but I can't I can't do the thing that he does when he's performing the poem. So
it allows you to return back to the headspace you were in. Because I mean, there's even a chance that if you were to see him like let's say you hadn't seen that, but you saw him read the poem like last year at a different event,
Yeah,
there's a chance that the impact wouldn't have even been the same because it wasn't the same. You weren't at the same stage in your poetry. You
yeah,
like, you know,
maybe.
that's not to say the poem wouldn't
It's
be
I
impactful,
mean,
but it's
yeah. To be clear, I want to be clear. Like, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right about like, you know, like really anything, because it's like, you know, the further that you are from, you know, I
like
was
context is
really
important,
new.
you know?
I was performing terrible. I want to be clear. I was a terrible poet. Okay, like if I had to sit through a set of the poems that I had back then, right now, I would hate it. Okay, so I've arguably gotten better. Like I would imagine, but yeah, but just to say that, like, yeah, that was an incredible set. He was a powerhouse. Yeah, I can. You'd have to kind of bring that event to memory or something like that. Like, I remember the shirt I was wearing. I remember the pants that I was wearing. I remember like what the weather was outside. I remember all the things from that, how crazy impactful that performance was, and how colorful and dynamic that performance was. And then like everything is crystallized with this book that I have forever.
But it's interesting you say that too, because in some ways it having the book for this experience that you were describing, having the
Yeah.
book enhanced your experience in a lot of ways because it's
Yeah.
allowing you to relive it. It adds on to it. So in some ways, I think we could take it a step further and say by having a feature where you don't have something like this, where you don't have something tangible that your audience can leave with, you know, in a lot of ways it's not even about the book. It's more like a totem. It's more like a representation that you take
Yeah.
back from the reading. And by not giving them that, in some ways it's not fair to them. That you're removing part of what the experience of your reading could be.
Yeah. You're
Stop being selfish.
You're taking away an entire dimension away from the experience. I know I'd almost liken it to, like, you know, there's chefs out there that can make incredible food, like the best tasting food that you ever have had in your entire life, and maybe they could make that food without making the food look particularly great at all. Like, maybe it just looks like a bowl of whatever, and maybe that's an amazing dish. But imagine if you just took that next step and you said, well, okay, not only are you going to have this in like incredible dish, but you're going to present it in this really beautiful fashion. You've plated it incredibly well. Now you added another dimension to like this experience. But then imagine if you did all that, and then for all the dishes that you prepared, you added a little menu book or a little cookbook next to it that was like, you want to know how to prepare this meal? Like, here's a cookbook. Now it's like every time I look at that cookbook, I might not go to your restaurant like every single night. Maybe your restaurant costs $1 million or whatever. Like, maybe you're like, you know, they're really, really accomplished. Maybe you're not like super accomplished, but maybe you're not going to go to that restaurant all the time, or maybe they're not going to be around to go to the restaurant all the time. But they'll always have maybe this little, maybe it's a souvenir, maybe it's like, oh, let me give it a shot, but they're not going to do it the same or as well as you. Maybe they're not going to have the kind of ingredients or whatever the situation is. I don't know. I'm telling chefs how to do their job, but yeah, it's just like this idea that now you have this additional dimension to this experience.